Inside the city of Ibadan, in western Nigeria, there was a young girl named Funmi, a very elegant and adorable girl. She lived with her family and she was the first child of her parents. Her parents adored her so much and made sure that she and her siblings have good things, even though her parents weren't very wealthy. As Funmi grew older, she committed in helping her community where they lived or do things to make everyone around her happy. On some weekends, she would bring children out to a tall tree in their community to teach them or to tell them interesting stories. As soon as Funmi finished secondary school, her parents took her to her grandmother in the village. Although she was displeased at first because she was used to the city life, but later on, she began to enjoy the village life and the peace and the beauty surrounding her. One day, while Funmi was in the village taking care of her old grandmother, someone came knocking at the door. An unexpected visitor. As soon as she opened the door, it was a very fine young man who came to see her. His name was Akin. As she let Akin inside the house, he expressed his feelings and intentions immediately to Funmi. But Funmi was taken aback because he was very forward with his intentions. But as time went on, Akin kept on visiting Funmi. And sooner than later, Funmi fell in love with Akin. Funmi was so much in love with Akin that she didn't even bother to know so much about him or where he was coming from. He was like her mystery man, but she loved him that way anyway. As weeks passed, Funmi and Akin's love flourished. Then one day, Akin lured her into his little apartment that was beside a river. As blinded as Funmi was, she went further without questioning any of Akin's actions. So immediately Funmi got into Akin's apartment, something strange happened to her. She lost her ability to speak and her eyes started bleeding. She was wondering what was happening to her. As she tried to speak, no words could find expression through her mouth. Then she started crying, banging the door so hard and seeking for help. But all of that brought nothing because Akin's house was very far from where people lived. Now Akin was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, she heard voices from the window of the apartment, and as soon as she looked outside, she was shocked about what she saw. She saw Akin with her grandmother talking and deliberating on what to do to Funmi. At that point, she was so helpless and confused. She knew that she was going to die, but she didn't fail to make a short prayer in her mind, asking God to help and save her. So while Akin and Funmi's grandmother were discussing, they started arguing and raining abuses on each other. Then some people that came to fetch water and wash in the river nearby saw them and went to call on the villagers. So as the villagers surrounded them, they knew that their plans to kill Funmi had failed. Funmi's grandmother started crying and confessing. As the villagers stood in amazement, wondering why Funmi's grandmother was crying helplessly, then she started confessing that she was a witch and she has been the one causing the death of children in the village to renew her life. And she saw how good her granddaughter Funmi was. She knew that if she kills Funmi, she would be more refreshed, better and powerful. That was why she convinced Akin to come and help her execute her plans for a little pay. But Akin had his own personal plans, hence their disagreement. Akin was a very selfish man who would do anything for money. He knew that agreeing to the old woman's request would only bring him closer to Funmi, his next victim, because he knew that eliminating Funmi would fetch him so much money. So immediately, people rushed into the room and rescued Funmi. But by then, she was already very weak and becoming unconscious. But thankfully, her little prayer saved her. She was finally restored to life, and the next day, she immediately left for the city back to her parents' house. So villagers didn't allow Funmi's grandmother and Akin to go free. They were beaten and locked up in prison for causing death and pain to the village. Then as soon as Funmi got back to the city of Ibadan, she was so traumatized, but that experience taught her a valuable lesson. After she was well recovered, she was now on a journey of educating young girls in their city of the dangers of trusting people without making proper findings about them. Funmi became so dedicated to serving her community, and that made young girls look up to her. Trusting people so easily without getting to really know them can become a harm to us. So many people are wolves in sheep clothing out there looking for whom to devour. But in everything we do, please, let's be very careful. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please subscribe, like, and share.